Welcome to It's Art, Let's Talk About It, a podcast sponsored by the Museum of Western Art in Kerrville, Texas. Located in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, the museum is dedicated to the preservation and promotion of the American West, especially through the art of the West. In this podcast series, we'll visit with artists, art collectors, and gallery directors working in the Western art genre. We'll talk about the history and heritage of Western art, and we'll talk about why talking about Western art is so important. I'm Darrell, the executive director of the museum, and I'll be your host for It's Art, Let's Talk About It. The podcast is a member of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network.
We're thrilled to announce that It's Art, Let's Talk About It was honored with a Communicators Award of Distinction for podcast in 2024. In today's episode, Darrell visits with Todd Connor, member of the Cowboy Artists of America.
And we're joined today by our good friend Todd Connor, a member of the Cowboy Artists of America and a good friend of the museum. And Todd, welcome to It's Art, Let's Talk About It.
Thanks, Darrell.
Yeah.
It's good to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Always fun to talk art with people. And you and I were out in the hall, and we started talking art, and I thought, oh, man, we need to be recording this.
Yeah.
For those of you who do know Todd, you know he's a member of the Cowboy Artists of America, a painter, and he just participated in the 41st Annual Roundup Exhibition and sale here at the Museum of Western Art, and congratulations, you sold your work.
Thank you.
And it's my understanding a patron who bought the work is going to gift it back to the museum for the permanent collection.
Quite an honor.
Yeah, that's always cool when you have somebody say, I love this so much, I think it needs to be in the museum.
This is where it all started for me, right here.
Was it really?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about, we always ask people, were you one of those guys who was painting when you were 3 years old, or is this a late in life kind of thing?
Not 3.
You know?
I don't remember I was doing it at 3.
Yeah. You know, I was talking
in trouble, I'm sure.
Jack Sorensen said he was getting in trouble for painting on his mother's walls.
I might have. I don't know.
And Ron Riddick was selling postcards to first grade classmates for a nickel, I think.
Yeah.
But other people come about it. Let's talk about how you came about it. I mean, what brings Todd Connor to this point where we're having works added to the permanent collection of the museum?
I can probably think the film industry, I guess.
Yeah?
I was obsessed with any genre that was not of this world. Sci-fi, monsters, Godzilla, you name it, and the West, the Old West.
Growing up where?
I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was raised in the outdoors, camping, hunting, fishing. Later, my dad and I got certified scuba diving, and so I was always outdoors all the time.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was brought up on watching movies all the time, and I love genres that were not of this world, and the Old West is one of those genres. And I started drawing Star Wars characters and stuff when I was probably my 10 and 11, in that time frame. Drawing TIE fighters and drawing Star Trek or anything, monsters, Godzilla. And then the Western thing, I was part of all that. I was big on the old Westerns growing up in the 70s. Yeah. And all the Westerns before that inspired me. John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, I became a huge Clint Eastwood fan and loved all that. And what happens, I bought a paint by number kit. And so this is fun, painting oils. I said, I'm going to try it without the numbers. So I got away from this, started doing some painting, and I ended up doing more landscape and wildlife.
Did you ever do Bob Ross, Happy Trees?
I did watch that, and there was a guy named Alexander.
Okay.
German guy.
Sure.
I can't remember his first name, but
yeah.
Him and Bob Ross were
sure. Hey, the partnership, yeah.
Yeah, and so I watched that and some other person too. And then my parents got me some lessons from a guy in Tulsa back in the 70s. And then, so I started, I remember somewhere that I did a lot of wildlife. I was obsessed with wildlife, fish and stuff like that, because I was always hunting and fishing with my dad. And then I decided, I'm going to try a Western, and I did a cattle drive with lightning and stuff. And I don't think I even have a picture of it. Long gone.
Really?
But I remember it in my mind. And then anyway, so that's where it all started. I stopped painting for a long time and worked for a little bit when the service came out. I'll talk about that in a minute. I'm sure you'll ask me. But when I got out, I was traveling around the country, and I happened into this particular museum, and it was a Cowboy Artists of America museum. So this was 1992.
Okay, so before we changed to the Museum of Western Art, while we were exclusive to the Cowboy Artist, we were about 10 years old, and you happened into the museum, Cowboy Artists of America Museum.
Yeah, a friend of mine said, well, you got to check this out, and we were just traveling around, bumping around the country. My dad actually lived in Texas at the time, so we was always already down here. And so we came in here, and I was mesmerized by the work. I'm like, people are making a living doing this.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to do.
We get that a lot from people who say, Joshua Stewart was here the other day, and he's been down here a lot, and it's one of those things, he comes down to just study the masters on the walls and look at them. Yeah, that's cool.
Nothing will inspire you like art. I came in here, I saw some artists like Bill Owen, Gary Carter, and everybody was on the wall, Ray Swanson, you name it. And it was like a kid in a candy store. And being that I was living up and around Tulsa at that time with my mom, I was going to the Gilcrease Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go see the Russell. They had
Sure.
a whole room of Russells, a whole room of Remingtons, then the Frank Tenney Johnsons and all that. And Thomas Moran.
Mm-hmm.
I was in heaven. And I'd go there once a week and just take it in. And I knew what I wanted to do the day when I walked out of the doors of this museum right here.
That's interesting.
And I literally pursued art training at that point.
And last night you hung on the walls next to Ron Riddick.
I'm pinching myself, and now there's a piece of the collection. I mean, really.
Yeah, you hung on the walls next to Ron Riddick and Wayne Bays, one of the senior guys in the CA, right next to your buddy Brandon Bailey.
Yep.
And it's fun to see people come full circle with that. And that just gives me the goosebumps to think that the museum has benefited from just being here. It's helped other people in their careers and all of that. You did mention, and you said, I know you're going to ask about it because it's a unique and wonderful story. You served in the military.
Yes.
For a number of years.
Yes.
And talk about that.
I was bored working for a living.
Yeah.
So I got to do something more exciting than
What were you
this.
doing?
I was working at Rockwell International,
Okay.
building airplane parts for the B-1 bomber.
And what inspired you to join the Navy?
It was too slow. I was 20, 21, 22, and I was like, I got to do something challenging before I'm too old to do that. So blow off some steam. This ain't cutting it. This work whistle to whistle and take off at 4 o'clock. No, this ain't gonna work.
But what you ended
I
up...
wanted to do something like Green Beret, something exciting like that. So my dad said, I work with a guy I want you to talk to. He came down. Well, he was an old UDT SEAL man from Vietnam days, and he came down and said, you got to go. You're a scuba diver. You need to check out the UDT SEALs. And I said, okay, I'll check it out. I even read a book on the subject. Back then, it wasn't all over billboards like it is these days. The movies, you had to really dig to find out what it was, and the recruiter would hardly even mention they existed. Anyway, I knew they existed, and I was going to do it, so I did. I joined. And
what year would that have been?
86.
86.
Joined.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do it the hard way. They didn't walk you through it back in those days. You didn't get all the pre-workups, the trainings, They hold your hand and walk you through it so you're in shape when you go there and all that. Now, back then, you're on your own. You say, hey, we're giving a test. When you're at boot camp, they say, hey, we're giving a test. SEALs, anybody want to volunteer? Right after they gave us all the inoculations, you're half sick. I mean, I failed miserably in that. So later when I was in my A school, I went and volunteered again after working out. I passed the test and orders to buds.
Here's an artist, and one of your fellow CA members said to me, you're probably the first Navy SEAL that's ever been a member of the Cowboy Artists of America.
Yeah, that's a fact.
It's hard to think about. Yeah. A lot of these guys are cowboys and ropers and school teachers, and yet here comes a Navy SEAL.
I wasn't a cowboy. I wish that had been my background, but it wasn't.
And I mean, I know my dad was of a generation serving in the military. He never talked about it, didn't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Did it because he loved his country, did it because he wanted the excitement, did that stuff. Mm-hmm. And people know you a long time and not ever know that you served the country as a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I'm proud to have done it.
And so thank you for your service on that. And
yeah, I wanted to do something.
It does make for a fascinating origin story, though, of how you got to be an artist. So you served and left the service and decided, what, I'm going to be an artist? When did you start making...
Right away, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
When did you start making a living?
I knew I knew though I was going to stay in the service and do this for a while, or I was going to have to. I was already 27. I said, this is the time I need to make a decision. I'm going to stay in here and do this, which is very tempting, and I had some generous financial offers and offers from other officers for other platoons that wanted my services. And so I decided there wasn't much going on, the Gulf War, but that kind of was a blip. And then I decided to get out, and I had a girlfriend that wanted me to get out and all that business. So I got out, and to unwind a little, I just traveled around the country, living in my truck and visiting historical sites. I was fascinated with history. I was American history, the Old West, and the Civil War. So I traveled to every Civil War battlefield, every site, every Western fort.
But
And I hiked and backpacked, and then I started visiting art galleries. And it all came together.
And yet you tell me there are others. There are people who serve as a team member.
Yeah, I just found out the other day talking to a friend of mine who was an ex-team guy.
What do you think makes that somebody go from being a warrior? I mean,
Talent. I knew a couple of guys who could draw pretty well, the teams.
Yeah.
They may not want to pursue it for a living, but
because you often don't think about those talents being coexistent.
Creativity is a big part of it.
But creativity being
a huge part of it.
The ability to overcome, adapt, think outside the box. Yeah.
Oh my God, you have no idea. The creativity is there, in just about, let's say most guys in that business are very creative.
It's because they have to think on their feet.
That's it.
They have to be alert and aware.
Yeah.
And so all those things lead to their creativity. They have to survive.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, creativity. I mean, sometimes I'm not going to talk too much about the operations, but it's not just you have to be quick on your feet. You got to be adaptable. If you're not part of being adaptable, I think, is being creative. Or part of being creative is being adaptable. I mean.
Yeah. You don't often hear that. The people who serve in one genre. We interviewed Steve C.S. Talley, who's an artist, who's on our show. He used to be an astrophysicist. I mean, he was and you're talking to him, and he was computer programming satellites to do various things. He's very scientific and yet he cranks out these wonderful little towels, pieces of backyards and towels and scenes of the mountains and stuff, and that you don't often put that together. So I'm always fascinated about how artists get to where they are.
I think as humans we have a creative urge primally, maybe.
Yeah.
Go back to the cave paintings in Lascaux in France.
So you had
that goes back to who knows how far back, right?
Yeah.
Men have been creating and women have been creating since the beginning of time, really.
Yeah.
And even if it's drawings in the dirt.
What a point!
I don't know what. Don't ask me where that comes from. It's primal. I don't know.
You think? Yeah.
It's part of the creator, I guess.
You're traveling the country, living out of your truck, visiting museums, Civil War sites. Mm-hmm. At some point, you have to make a decision, a business decision. I'm going to do this and pursue it full time. So when did that happen?
Okay. What I knew was I wanted to do something creative to tell the story of the West. The first thing that came to my mind. Well, I was a photographer. I loved to take pictures. I still love taking pictures, and writing was another thing I'd like to do. So I thought maybe I'm going to do writing, be a historian, do something like that. And then it started clicking when I visited a few galleries. And then it was in cement when I came into this museum. That was it. I'm going to tell it visually. That's my talent. I'm a visual person. So that's the way I'm going to tell it.
How long ago was it?
The movies entered my mind too. And then I decided I didn't really want to get into that whole rat race of Hollywood and try to do that.
Right.
In, you know what I mean? It's this way I can do my thing. See, when I tell it visually in pictures.
So how do you develop as an artist once you've made that decision?
That's when I decided to research art training in schools, and there weren't very many in those days. Not much going on. So to follow up this museum, so first of all, I got with the VA helped me pay for my school, and I signed up for Kansas City Art Institute, which was closest to Oklahoma, where I was living at the time. And so I went there, and the training was awful. It was terrible. Great campus, some good people, but the training was not classical training. It was not what I needed. Anyway, so what I failed to mention, after visiting this museum, I applied to a workshop in Big Sky, Montana at the 320 Ranch, and it was CA workshop. 10 CA artists teaching. So we went up there, and this was 1993, the year after I walked into this museum, and I got to go to that workshop.
Okay.
One week workshop with 10 CA artists. Gary Carter organized it.
That's great. Yeah.
And there was a bunch. Grant Speed was there. Okay. I mean, I think Lauren Ance was the newest member at that time. It was wonderful. So not only to get to be around the CA, I got to go to Montana, and I got to meet a lot of the models, the people that model, the mountain men and stuff like that. And so I got to be friends with them. And then I started doing mountain men rendezvous. So I started immersing myself in the world of not only art but history. And I had a good, fruitful conversation with Gary Carter at that workshop. And he said, you should check out the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California.
Sure.
So I did. I went out there and looked at their facilities, and I was blown away. It blew Kansas City Art Institute out of the water as far as the facilities and the focus of their of the training was more classical, figure drawing, figure painting, learning the nuts and bolts, and so I knew I had to go there. So I ended up moving out there on my own, and the VA picked me up again later so I could finish and get a degree. But I would have been willing to go out there on my own dime for two semesters just to get that kind of training for whatever I could do. And I did, and I ended up getting a degree in illustration. Graduated in 1997.
Okay. That
was a great experience because I met other instructors outside of Art Center. I took some workshops with Dan McCaw and Dan Pinkham, who's also a friend of Ron Riddick.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. I learned a lot from these people. And Steve Houston, the master of all masters, draftsman, taught at Disney. And I learned a lot about drawing from him, not counting what I learned at Art Center. Yeah, so it was the best thing I ever did was make that move.
How do you make a living at that point?
My first job out of Art Center was Universal Studios.
Okay.
I worked on the back lot at Universal Studios Japan theme park. So I was colorboard painter, which means that you take architect drawings and you match colors that they have assigned for the building facades and whatnot. It's meticulous, but it trained me to mix color. I'll tell you that. I had to match these colors to a T. And so it really developed my color set.
If you put red and yellow together, you're going to get,
green.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. And there are people who don't know that. I mean,
no, I know.
We educate people every day here at the museum. They come in and go, that's not a color out of a tube.
Right.
No, because these guys know how to mix three colors together to get a fourth.
Mixing colors is a trick.
And it's a tricky business. I said, I've watched them do it. I've watched people.
But really, to be able to do that, even though the job was a little bit on the boring side, but it was great people and it taught me a whole lot about mixing color, just having to be that meticulous about it.
Yeah. So you were there how long?
A little over a year.
Yeah.
And then the project was over.
Yeah. And then what?
And then I decided to move to Montana. I moved to Livingston, Montana.
Been there ever since?
Not in Livingston. I lived there 2 years.
Yeah.
And I moved over to southwest of Montana by Ennis area.
Yeah.
Lived there for a long time, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And now I live in Fort Benton, Montana, which is northeast of Great Falls.
North of my old hometown,
Yeah, the birthplace of Montana.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's where steamboats.
Do you remember your first sale?
When I moved to Livingston, I took unemployment after the job at Universal. So I had 6 months of full-time painting before I had to get a job or start selling. So I went to Livingston and I busted my tail and I worked really hard and developed a huge body of work and got me a gallery in Bozeman, Montana. And they started selling a few things for me. And
which gallery was
it? Right then, it was Chaparral.
Chaparral's, yeah.
Do you remember them?
I do.
Yeah. They were there, back in late 90s, and that's when I got in there in 1999. Had a one-man show. They gave me a one-man show the following year in 2000, and it was almost a sellout. And I was off and running. I've never done anything else since.
Just took off and stayed with it.
Yeah, and then a few years later, I started going to the Russell because I got wind of that. I started going there, and then I started showing them there, 2003, 2004, somewhere in there.
That's my first years there. Yeah, that's where
when
you and I met that first time was at the Russell.
Yep.
When I was the director of the C.M. Russell Museum in Great Falls. And we had just broken up our relationship with the Ad Club, and what a nightmare all of that was. But the Russell became the new show, and it's been operating that way now since 15 years, I guess, which has proven to be very beneficial for them. And it's one of the great and premier shows of the world. You're a member
That's
of
where
the...
I got my start, really.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
It's weird. I was at the Russell, and you got your start there, but I'm now here, and this is where you first cemented the idea of being...
Full circle. In more ways than one.
The world is a strange and wondrous place, isn't it?
I know, isn't it, though?
And you're a member of the Bison Skull Society?
Yeah, the Russell Skull Society. That was started when Michael DeShimin was hired there. And
who followed me when I left the Russell. Yeah.
Now he's...
And then he went to the Briscoe, which I had left to go to the Russell. So you can't make this up, right? You can't make this crap up. It's just too weird.
The only thing constant is change in this business.
Yeah, that's true. And the art is still why we do it. But so you started developing a collector base, and you just kept painting. And at one point 2 years ago, somebody approached you, or when was the first time you got approached by the CA?
Quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
Michael Dudash started talking to me.
Okay.
And that was at the Russell. We were showing there.
Sure.
He was also a Skull Society member.
Sure.
And he just said, "You ever thought about it?" I said, "That's what inspired me to do it in the first place. Of course, I've thought about it." And so I'm like, he said, "Just think." Well,
what's funny is that we talk all the time within the industry, always trying to guess who the next CAs are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm right a lot, and I'm wrong a lot. You know, I think that somebody's going to join and then they never do, or going to be asked to join and they never do.
Yeah.
And then I think to myself, you know, how did they get that guy? And yet it's a unique organization. And you were brought in
last year.
You're about to do your first show.
Yep.
First full show this coming November 2024. And
me and 3 other guys.
And that's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun because when they announced Todd Connor, I didn't know some of the others real well at all, but I've been aware of your name and work for 20 some odd years. And I thought, yeah, that's good. That's cool. Oh, and I remember you and I having a conversation. Do you want to do this? How do we? Because it's tough.
Well, first of all, it's another show that requires, a lot of work, really.
Yeah.
And then you have the trail ride every spring.
Yeah.
And
which you just got off of.
That's a trip. Yeah, I just did my first one here a couple of weeks ago. Wonderful experience. The camaraderie is wonderful. It really is.
It's a great group.
Yeah, it
is.
Know.
And earlier this afternoon, we were standing out front, and you noticed the cornerstone of the building, and it's got all those signatures: Joe Beeler and Gary Carter, and the guys you've mentioned, and
legendary.
And now you're a member of that organization.
Yeah. And it's just, wow.
You get your work ready for that show?
I literally have something to live up to. Yeah. Do I have my work ready? Yeah. Got the first one done.
Let's talk about your process.
Got sketches for a lot of them.
Yeah. Talk about your process. Are you one of those get on it, cram it out, stay with it 24 hours a day till you get it finished, or do you paint a little here, a little there? What's your typical day look like?
Typical day, usually I'm afternoon night painter.
Are you?
Typically, yeah. I do a lot of preliminary stuff to work up to them. I don't just bang them out. In the old days, I banged a lot of them out, and sometimes you can tell the quality suffers. So I put a lot more time into them these days than I used to.
Brush, palette knife, combination of both?
Mostly brush, some palette knife in the foreground and whatnot. I don't generally paint a lot of my detail with a palette knife. I used to be a little more painterly than I am now, and I think that's part of trying to reel it in a little bit and be more disciplined in my approach to finishing paintings. We were just talking about this out there in the hall. Mm-hmm. But the finishing takes so much discipline, so I've been trying to work on really honing in, making sure I'm finishing these things, not leaving a whole lot of... It doesn't mean I'm over painting, I hope. There's a fine line there between not finishing and overworking, and so I've been trying to find that balance. So it ends up taking me a lot more time in the last 10 or 20% of a painting than the whole rest of the other 80%.
Yeah. That made me really nostalgic. My brother was a painter, and as I mentioned to you, he was one of those 80% guys. He could get it to 80%, and then he couldn't finish it. And I miss him every day, but I think back on his career, and I think, God, I wish I had been able to figure out a way to help him finish the painting. He would get it 80% done, and hell, he'd get bored and go do something else.
You know what?
It's tough.
I can relate to how he felt completely.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you've almost said what you need to say at that point.
At that 80 point?
Really. I mean, you've pretty much said it.
Yeah.
But you probably aren't going to sell it at that point.
80 point.
Now there's people that do. I mean, you can go to the loosest painters out there, and there is a level of finish. And what finish means to one artist, it may not be the same thing as to another artist. I mean, look at Nikolai Feshin.
Yeah.
Some people say, "Oh, it's not finished."
No, it's finished for Nikolai.
It's very finished.
Sure.
And the amount of time he had into those, people wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And there's so much that goes into those. So finish is elusive. Very elusive.
How prolific are you?
I'm not very prolific at this point.
I mean,
because I'm trying to...
One a day, one a month, one a week,
That depends on the size.
Okay, all right. That's fair.
Okay, so let's say I do a 9x12. I generally, in the old days, I do one in 3 hours.
Okay.
3, 4, or 5 hours. A 9x12. Western painting, figures, all that.
Yeah.
Not good enough now. I'll go back into it in a couple of days after it dries, and I'll put more into it.
I watched.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched Tony Pro yesterday. The artist Tony Pro.
Yeah.
do a portrait of one of our mountain men who was gunfighters, was there, and he sat down in less than an hour, he'd banged it all out. And I thought, sign it and sell it. I mean, it's done. And Tony looked at me and said, "Oh no, I'm."
Okay, but I know you say that. Okay,
he said, "I'm hours and hours from." And I didn't see anything wrong with it.
And some of that's the artist being neurotic too, because I mean, there's people who said, "No, you stop now," and I'll be like, "No, I'm going to keep going." But there was a period where I just decided I needed to work from life more. I got too much into all the doing Western paintings. I've been doing life work. So I started bringing people in to do portraits, live portraits. And I do 11 by 14, 12, 16 size range, sometimes 16, 20. But I'd literally stop at about 5 hours. And what I could get done in that 5 hours, that was the painting.
Really?
I might tickle it up after they left, but I'm not going to bring them back for another sitting, which is what you should do if you want to do a finished portrait.
Right.
But I got these things to a level where it was like a plein air painting. It is what it is.
Do you do
some of those have way more charm?
Do you
than
do quick draws, quick finish events?
I have.
At the Russell, they do.
I've done a few of those. Yeah.
Quick finish thing, and it frustrated a lot of artists. So I changed it from a quick draw to a quick finish.
Yeah.
And we were able to attract a lot more artists. They would bring in a 3/4 finish paint. People want to watch the artist paint.
And it's hard for them to wrap their brain around the beginnings of a painting if they're not other artists looking, because another artist will want to watch you start something. A client, they can't see anything yet. They want to see. I think they'd rather see it half finished before you start painting on it. You see what I mean? Because that part bores them, because it's the drawing and all that crap.
We had demos this weekend at the 41st Annual Roundup, and we had people drawing and painting. We had people sculpting, and it was fun to watch the crowd, the citizens, the non-artists come in, and some of them would stand there and watch them for 2 hours and never leave.
Yeah.
And others would walk up 3 minutes, get bored, and walk off. It's a process that has to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm always fascinated by somebody else's process. So who were your influences in the art world?
I tell you, it runs the gamut. I'm not going to go all the way back to the Renaissance, but I'll stay a little more recent. I mean, not recent, I'd say Rembrandt was a big influence.
Sure,
What an amazing, his peers. I mean, you could, Vermeer, you could say that stuff has an artistic quality. I'm not talking stylistically, but I'm talking about something more intangible, something more soulful than technique. They were all good technicians. They were that's what they were.
Yeah.
And because they only worked from life. They didn't have photographs to copy and stuff like that. So
yeah.
they were always working from life. You're always a better artist when you do. I'll jump forward a little. I'll probably say Sargent and Sorolla, the illustrators. Remington and Russell, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
And less known is Frank Tinney Johnson, who's really one of my all-time favorite Western
Nobody
painters.
does a nocturnal better than
I know.
Frank Tinney Johnson.
Just the way his value structures and his gradations and his subtle color temperature changes. Yeah, there's such a thread of truth in his work.
Yeah.
That transports you to that time period. That transports you to that place. You feel like
I'll never forget my friend, and she was a curator of mine at the Russell. Anne Moran was her name.
Yeah.
Anne went on to be at the Oklahoma City at the Cowboy Hall of Fame and passed away shortly after going there.
Right.
But I remember her saying to me that Frank Tinney Johnson always fascinated her because that was the first time she learned that night was not black.
Isn't it amazing?
And I thought, it's not. It's green. It's black. It's blue. It's purple. It's all these wonderful mixtures of.
But then there's Remington's, right?
Yeah.
So his tended more toward a greenish
color.
And they're beautiful. So what you're really talking about is the relationships. It's not any one color, really. In fact, when you look out at night, you're probably not seeing a whole lot of color. You're seeing values, light and dark.
That's very true.
And so what colors you assign to those values and those relationships have to work together. And so you see that as a different palette in a Remington as opposed to a Johnson. You know what I'm saying?
You mentioned early on Gary Carter, for example, Lauren Ince. Who was in that workshop? Who was teaching that workshop? Do you remember?
Yeah, Fred Fellows was there.
God, what a great
Robert Pummel.
Yeah, lives right here in Kerrville.
Pummel?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was there.
One of the great guys.
Bill Moyers.
Wow.
Yeah.
You had a workshop that was the Giants.
Joe Beeler.
The Giants, yeah.
Joe Beeler.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to meet Joe Beeler.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I thought it was Slim Pickens at first.
That's funny. I like that. Beeler was one of the characters, and now you're a member of a group that's really the characters of Western art, right? I mean, you guys are the legends. You guys are the. We sold out last night of all the people the CAs who were in the show. There were 4 of you, and we sold every piece, and that speaks to people wanting that work.
Yeah,
that's pretty exciting. So you're excited about your first show, November?
I'm very excited about it.
Nervous?
Yeah, of course I am.
You'd be a little crazy if you weren't.
Yeah, I got one done, almost. And getting ready to start the other. I've got other stuff to do, too. A couple other things I have to paint for.
Yeah.
I gotta
you and I talked. I said, can you be in the Roundup this year? You said, I'll send you one painting. I can do one. Yeah. And that gets you in the door. It helps people love the work and they want to see it. People are busy. The artists, man, there's a lot of shows. It used to be was us and Idletor came along. The Briscoes now doing a show. The Russell does a show. Everybody and their dog seems they're doing shows. And then the CA has their big show.
Yeah. So my goal is just to get more prolific. I just have there's a lot of fits and starts because we're traveling a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still going back and forth to Oklahoma. My mom's there and all that. We're dividing our time between Montana and Oklahoma.
What's the future of Western art?
I hope it's bright.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. People ask me that all the time.
I don't think you can separate it. We were just at the Oklahoma City Western Heritage Awards at the Cowboy Hall of Fame, and that's the purpose. The reason we go every year is because we have friends there and get invited by board members, but also John Wayne's kids are there, and they always honor Lifetime Achievement to Reba for this year, for instance.
Right.
Red Stiegel's always there. He's part of the CA. And
good friend of ours in the museum,
So I go there to support that because they're honoring ranchers, they're honoring the writers, they're honoring documentary filmmakers, they're actors and people who do things toward the Western, to preserve the West.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, to be in the CA, that is my number one thing.
And it's probably
the West.
It's one of my favorite museums.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great place. It's fabulous.
But to answer your question, is they're trying to preserve the West, those art forms, and the rest of us, the painters and sculptors, are trying to preserve it.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do here at the museum.
And I think it's bright if we keep doing these things and educating people, and it doesn't get squashed. You know what I mean? Because we need to keep our history alive. That's who we are. We are our history. If we erase that, then there's nothing left of America.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that makes this country unique is the fact that we have people who are creative, and it's a free market enterprise kind of deal. And one of the things we're trying to do here at the Museum of Western Art is, in fact, keep that Western history alive, that Western genre. Keep it in the forefront. We celebrate the American West every day.
I know, and also
that's exciting. It's fun.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, and we sure appreciate everything you do in all the museums. But the Hollywood's making more of this genre. I think that's great.
A swing back.
I think it's great.
Lonesome Dove, and then Open Range, and and now the Yellowstone series with Taylor Sheridan.
Good for Taylor Sheridan for doing all this. I think it's great.
1883 and.
Yeah,
and now Kevin Costner's doing his own little version called Horizons, and so.
Yeah, and he started off 30 years ago with Dance with Wolves, and that inspired me. That and Lonesome Dove, those two things really inspired me to.
Yeah, those were my two inspirations in the Western art genre.
They came out about the same time, and that was my formation time for doing this. Those films were part of my soul, really. I mean, that helped get me started in this.
And the market seems like it comes and goes, but you think long term we're good?
I do, because I think there's enough young people that get it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. Are young people going to keep honoring the West? Are they going to keep making films about the West? Are they going to keep doing art about the West? Or are the young people that grow up, are they going to be like you? Are they going to be in charge of a museum and keep this thing going? I do. I think there is. I know people. I know some people in the Oklahoma City show there. I know some people in the CA even. There's some younger people. And they're very passionate about keeping that going.
One of the things we've, as our board and staff, we've made a decision to do is that we're inviting some younger, newer, maybe not quite ready artists to our shows. Joshua Stewart comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
He's a young man who I think has a bright future. He shows in the show in our galleries.
Yeah, he's a good little painter, too.
He's a good little painter. He's a great guy, but he's young. He's, Brownlee. He's only been painting a couple of years, and yet she's winning awards all over the country, for her graphics work. So I'm hoping that the future is bright with these young artists. And so
this is being part of CA. Hopefully I'll get a chance to do some workshops and help to inspire younger people to
what do you say? What do you say to that painter who's out there listening to this podcast? He's tuned in because he wants to hear the new CA member, Todd Connor. I mean, you've been doing this a long time. I'll see the same thing I asked Ron Riddick. I asked James Muir, Jason Scull. He's been doing it 40 years. What do you say to those young people who are out there painting and sculpting, and what's your advice for them? Just keep going, bear down,
keep going,
go to school?
Absolutely. What? Learn everything you can. Seek out people who are masters. And really go to the nuts and bolts. Don't stop reading your art history. Go all the way back to the Romans if you have to. Study that stuff. Go to the museums. Go to the Met, go to the Louvre, go wherever you want to go. Go to Italy and let that be your teacher. Don't get too hung up on who's hot right now. Don't do that.
Yeah.
This is my advice, okay? Don't look at me. Look at people 2 generations back that I looked at. Go look at Remington and Johnson.
I got a real kick out of during CA last year. Group of us went over to Dallas and saw the Sorolla exhibition at SMU.
Oh, I wish I could have seen it.
Oh, my God. And we were walking through the room, and there's a couple of 3 or 4 CA members. We all went together. And I got a kick out of 3 or 4 CA members, like children, standing there studying this guy's painting. They're picking it apart and having a conversation about brushstrokes, looking at the work. And it's never too young to learn, never too old to keep studying. And
that's a fact.
And to get better.
No.
And I got
go ahead.
I got a real kick out of last night, standing there watching Ron Riddick talk to 4 or 5 painters, younger painters especially, and especially some of the old, the local, more localish people who are not, nationally known, and it just basically putting a little class together.
Yeah, I think it's great. Ron's awesome.
He was standing there for 25, 30 minutes just holding court and talking.
And he's sharing some very great wisdom.
And there's some good stuff.
Really good stuff.
And it was fun to watch some of the younger painters gather around. He'd get a little people, what are they talking about? And they just kept, a crowd built.
When Ron talks, people listen.
Because it was but it was fun though, right? It was, right. And it was educational, and a lot of them had learned, my God, that's great stuff. And he had said to him later, I said, you'd talk to a rock if it'd listen to you. And he says, I love sharing this stuff. I love it. And I hope I can give some kind of something back.
That's why we love Ron. So let me answer. I have another part to add to your last question.
Right.
About advice to young people. When you're doing this stuff, if you're trying to tell the story of our West, especially historical part of it, be sure you do your research and try to get it right. Take the time and do that. Don't get so many deadlines that you don't have time to do your research and do it right. Because once you get in too many shows, all of a sudden you're in a panic and you're not taking the time to do to do the artist justice. Hollywood's guilty of this too.
Yeah, so absolutely.
We've got to try to get it right. We've got to try to get if it's a specific event, try to get the area, at least the landscape somewhere in the ballpark. Try where it was, what they were wearing, what kind of, if they had right weapons, what kind of weapons they had. I went so far in my Alamo paintings at the Briscoe to research the phase of the moon the night before the Alamo. And so just little things like that. People appreciate.
That's dedication.
There's a lot of people that buy art, especially Texans, by the way, are sticklers on history.
And they know that's an 1866 revolver.
Yeah.
That should be
I don't really paint with that much detail to be able to tell if it's an 1866 revolver, but it better look like it could be.
At least that era. Yeah. Yeah, not a modern Colt.
Yeah, you don't want to put a 6-shooter in there.
A Glock.
A Glock. Yeah, there's that, right? You don't want to put a slide on it.
We've been visiting with our friend Todd Connor, member of the Cowboy Artists of America, on It's Art, Let's Talk About It. And Todd, we wrap up this show all the time by saying, people want to know more about you. How do they do it? They go out to toddconnor.com. Is it that simple, or is it what?
My website is Todd Connor Studio.
ToddConnorStudio.com. And you're available on Facebook, Instagram, what? All of those?
Yeah, I don't probably post as much as I should, but I am on both of those.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be posting on our website photographs of your work. We do a little bio. We have clickable links for those people who want to listen to the podcast and play along. They can go out there and look for your work. What's next for Todd Connor? I mean, you've got the CA. That's probably your big next, right?
Yeah, and sometimes I look to my wife and Mimi to find out what's next.
I've learned, like I have with so many great artists, that if I want something, I don't call Todd, I call Mimi.
That's it. You call Mimi, man. She's got it all dialed in. So
Mimi will tell me, yeah, this is what we're going to do. This is what Todd's going to do.
Now, there's a lot of she's more creative than I am. She's more creative than I am. She comes up with ideas, and so sometimes I run with them. And sometimes I poo them, and I shouldn't. But
yeah,
she's really good at that.
Yeah, it's been a joy getting to know Mimi over the years. And yeah, you're right.
She's a brainstormer.
She's a brainstormer.
Yeah,
and she's a marketer, and she's got her act together. Really we sell Todd Connor tiles right here, some of your tiles from the...
Yeah, thank you.
And that's because of Mimi, right? Every time you guys come through, it's Mimi's bringing some new idea that... And it's always fun to get to know the spouses and the brains behind the operation, if you will. But we sure do appreciate the quality of your work, the beauty of it, and we're so honored that you participate in the life of this museum.
Thank you.
And we hope you'll do more.
I appreciate it. I'm still trying to learn every day. This is not an easy endeavor. I feel like every time I step up to the easel, I'm going there to learn something.
What's your favorite painting? Your next one?
The one after that.
The one after that. I asked an artist one time, what's your favorite paintings in the next one? Because I haven't screwed it up yet.
Yeah, I've already screwed up the next one.
I've already screwed up the next one, but not this one, not the one I'm about to do.
Exactly.
There's always hope in that next painting in there.
Yeah, even more hope with the next one.
We've been joined today by our good friend Todd Connor, and we try to keep these at about 30 minutes. We've already gone for almost 50, so that's okay.
Lies when you're having fun.
It's Art, Let's Talk About It is a podcast production of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network. You can find us at museumofwesternart.com. We want you to go visit our friend Todd at toddconnorstudio.com. And watch for his Facebook. And if a lot of people join his Facebook and Instagram, follow him on that. Maybe he'll do more postings. Or
Mimi does a lot of the postings.
Get Mimi to do it, because you're building quite a reputation and quite a following. And we're just proud. One of the next things we've got to do, and I'll tell listeners about this now, is that we've got to get you and the other 3 guys who were brought in to the CA last year here to the museum for a handprint boot print ceremony. For those who don't know, we have a garden out back, and we have, from Joe Beeler up, all of the CAs, when they get brought into the CA, they come here to the museum, and we do a handprint, boot print, signature. I have a branding iron with a CA logo on it that is yours to take home once you do that handprint, boot print ceremony. Yeah. And that's always been fun. It goes back, it's like I say, it goes back to Joe Beeler. And the greats are in there. Howard Turpning's in there, and Joe Beeler and Gary Carter and Lauren Entz. And so we want you to join the garden. The joke is that's where the CAs are buried. We tell them, cremate you, put you in a chock full of nuts can, and we'll put your body under your slab out there in the garden. But it's fun because we'll see kids, young artists. I saw a young man yesterday who's an artist who was here. He was out there putting his handprint in the handprint of Howard Turpning, and it's emotional. That's wonderful to think that this place and this kind of stuff inspires others to create art.
Man, thank you for carrying on that tradition.
No, it's our pleasure, and thank you for joining us today on It's Art, Let's Talk About It. We hope you'll come back often and know that you're always welcome here at the Museum of Western Art.
Thank you.
All right,
appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a good one.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of It's Art, Let's Talk About It, a production of the Museum of Western Art in Kerrville, Texas. We hope you'll visit the museum in person. We're located at 1550 Bandera Highway in Kerrville, Texas. Find out more about us by going to www.museumofwesternart.com. And we hope you'll join us next time for It's Art, Let's Talk About It. The podcast is produced by the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network.